Hey there, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to get started with our Copia Copilot Lunch and Learn. We're going to be diving into code gen and translations. We're just going to give it about 60 seconds before we get started, and then I will hand it off to our panelists today. Thank you. All right, a couple more people joined. Let's go ahead and get started. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our host today and Copia's Director of Product Marketing, Jerry Abbey.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you to everyone that's joining today. Looking forward to giving you a great brief presentation here that's going to showcase Copia Copilot and give just a quick intro into Copia if you are new to Copia. So if you are new to Copia, we are an industrial DevOps platform looking to change the future of automation. In industrial code and technology in the operational technology space has changed drastically over the last several decades. And we are at an inflection point where industrial DevOps is not a nice to have, it is a must have. And we are approaching it with Git-based source control and collaboration, looking to implement automated testing, eventually looking at deployment management, observability, and monitoring. And today, talking about where AI comes into this equation. Copia today is our Git-based source control and device-linked disaster recovery and backup solution. Within source control, we have this AI feature of Copia Copilot that we're going to be showcasing for you. We've been doing a lot of research on the market so that we can understand where these technologies are going, where they're needed, why they're needed. And in our first annual State of Industrial DevOps report released a few months back, we saw that there are so many different devices across the plant floor. Most organizations are using an average of 5.5 different PLC types, let alone all of the other many devices. And when you have industrial code for all of those different things being managed by different people, it's really important to have a single source of truth to control all of that. Also, if you haven't downloaded it yet, we're going to be putting into the chat a link to this report, the first annual State of Industrial DevOps Workforce Edition, which we just released a few weeks ago. It's a wealth of data talking about many different things. And the lead data piece is that 47% of organizations are still managing industrial code in Excel files. While that may have worked, it is not a best-in-class approach that's going to future-proof your organization and set you up for success. In this report, we went wide with our data collection, looking at the St. Louis Fred database and tracking automation and industrial production trends for the last 50 years, laying alongside technology change, process change, and the impact on that production. We also looked from the employee and employer perspective with some of our own data from surveying 200 manufacturing executives across North America and found how they are using technologies and how they are viewing employee recruiting and how employees are viewing employers. So there's really a great wealth of data in here, looking at some of the gaps in process approach, looking at how to future-proof your organization through a collaborative approach that drives investment in your employees so that they feel that they're adding value. We also tied in a few industry reports at the end and a few case studies talking about the importance of finding a vendor that matches with your unique organization view so that you can align and have maximum value from the relationship. And lastly, ending on that note of AI, where it's coming in, how it can accelerate the impact of people and unite people, process, and technology for the benefit of your organization and driving profitable growth, which is the most important thing when you're thinking about technology and investment in your organization today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Nick Buckley.
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm just going to spend a minute kind of prefacing what I'm about to show. So for those of you who aren't aware, my name is Nick Buckley. I am the technical product manager here at Copia for our source control, vendor integration teams, as well as our Copilot team. I have a background in controls engineering, leading a team of controls engineers before I came to Copia. So what we're going to show today, as Jerry mentioned at the top of the meeting, is a demonstration of Copia Copilot's code generation capabilities. And to kind of set the stage a bit here, what I'm going to be showing here is asking Copilot to generate a basic sequencer routine, a template, for the purposes of this demo. Cases where this would be useful, you know, for an experienced controls engineer, you've probably made a sequencer routine, or probably have a standard that you've used many times before. But I know in my experience and after talking with many of our customers, with new engineers, these types of simple questions and just simple pieces of code for new engineers, junior developers, are questions that people often ask. And I know that my background is in electrical engineering, and I didn't learn any of this in my undergraduate. And so I kind of had to learn a lot on the job. And I think that's pretty common in the industry. So I'm going to share my screen here and walk through this demo, and we'll have time for questions throughout and at the end too.
Yeah, please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them live.
All right, so this is the Copia Copilot interface in the web browser. So what I'm going to be showing right here is submitting that prompt, and I'm going to just paste in the prompt so you don't have to sit here and watch me type for a minute, but I'll describe the prompt before I submit it. So as you can see, I'm asking it to generate a simple sequencer routine written in ladder logic. I want it to contain 5 empty steps that I could fill in with whatever logic I wanted later on. And in this example, I'm kind of pretending that I have a few variable names, tag names that I want Copilot to use so I can incorporate it easily within my existing project. So I specify that it should have 5 empty steps. I say that it should start on a specific input named B sequence start, and then restart automatically after all of the steps have finished. I also specify that I want to stop immediately if there's ever an alarm condition that would be indicated by this V faulted bit. And then I tell it to just only use native instructions so it doesn't also try to make any custom AOIs, just to keep this simple. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And then pretty shortly here, we should see Copilot start to stream the response here. So we're going to see this come in real time. And once it's finished, we will see the actual rendering of this in ladder logic. While this is going, just to mention that Copia's Copilot generation capabilities today are focused on ladder logic and structured text. As far as interpretation goes, which we're not really demonstrating here, it expands across, broadly the different languages. So as we can see here, it has generated a simple sequencer routine, and we'll notice that it does have the 5 empty steps that I've asked for. And without me even explicitly asking it to, it's left some run comments, so it's easy to understand what's happening here. I can edit these later on. So looking through, we do see that each step does not execute if there's a faulted condition, as well as the beginning of it is only starting if we get that specific B sequence start variable to be true. Now I could absolutely modify this or ask Copilot to modify it by saying, please add the specific logic to these steps. But for the sake of this brief Deminar, I'm going to leave it at this. Now, at this point, I could use this code in a number of different ways. First and foremost, I could just look at it, reproduce it in my IDE myself if I wanted to. As you might imagine, though, for a lot of rungs, that's going to take quite a bit of time. And so there are a couple other options you can use to get your results. First one being downloading the L5X in an importable format. And excuse me for just a second. Sorry about that. So we can download the L5X, import it into our project. We have that there. And I wish my download screen would go away. There we go. So that's one way to do it, but you're still going to follow a few steps to go into your IDE, file import to import the L5X. There are actually a couple other ways that you can use Copilot to get your results faster into your IDE, with them being leveraging the neutral text representation of these rungs. So you're probably aware, if you've done any ladder logic development in Studio 5000, that these rungs are represented in a text-based format. So I can actually click the rung numbers themselves to copy that neutral text to my clipboard, just to show you that there. And if I have multiple rungs that I want to copy and paste all at once, I can select them, copy, and then paste into the IDE to automatically populate them quickly. So that's demonstrating the generation in ladder logic. But now let's say, perhaps we're doing a project for a customer, and the customer demands that all code be written in structured text. That's their standard. And in this code maybe is your standard template for a sequencer written in ladder logic. So the final thing that I'm going to demonstrate is how we can ask Copilot to convert this language from ladder logic to structured text. So let's do that right now. Say, great, can you please convert this to structured text instead? And then I'm also going to specify that I want it to maintain the same original functionality while maintaining the original behavior and functionality. So we'll go through that, and you'll notice too that I didn't need to state all of the conditions of the original prompt. Copilot will retain the context of this conversation and should know that I'm talking about the piece of code that it had just generated. And so we see that it's going to start to begin here, streaming these responses. And here in a moment, we should see it look rendered more nicely and be more familiar to you as a Studio 5000 user. So we'll wait for that. And we just finished. The prompt is adding some final notes on what's actually going on here. So it's describing the process of the flow, showing any differences with the structured text version, or at least describing them. And then looking at this, we see this is one way to approach the sequencer in structured text, where it's checking to make sure that, for the first initial step, still is checking to ensure that the sequence start command or that tag has been set, or the sequence has completed, and that the sequence is not in a faulted state. All of the comments are still retained, still in a easy to use, readable format. And then similar to the structured text, or excuse me, similar to the ladder logic, I could download this L5X to import. But since it's a text-based version, it's probably easiest to just highlight, copy, and paste into the IDE. So that's the demonstration of some simple cases of code generation. This is certainly not the extent of the capability of Copilot. It's just, I think, a good representation of the code generation and translation capabilities. Also worth noting is that the structured text can be converted back into ladder logic as opposed to the opposite direction. And I think a few use cases where this we've seen users use this. One being that you have a standard in one language and now need to use it in another. But I can also imagine this being useful where you've perhaps found example code from maybe a device vendor that's written in a different language that you want to instead use in another. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Nick. Very clear and explained. And audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we can answer them live right now. If you have questions about what Nick presented, or if you have some other questions about the functionality or availability of Copilot, happy to address those as well. While we wait for questions, I'm just going to plug one of our upcoming events. We're beginning a fireside chat series with special guests to unpack that State of Industrial DevOps workforce report that I mentioned earlier. The first session is going to be March 11th with former Gartner analyst Rick Francosa. If you're not familiar with Rick, he was at Gartner for about 14 years. He has over 40 years of experience within the industry and is just an absolute pleasure to talk to because of his wealth of knowledge. Really looking forward to having that conversation, and I hope that you'll join us. In the chat, I think you'll find a link to register, and I hope that you do join us for that. It looks like we do have one question in now. What industry have you tried this on the shop floor? So I think that question's looking for where this has worked so far, I guess, with our customer examples.
Great question, and thanks for submitting it. Of the Copia customers that have used Copilot today, they've spanned really all of the different types of customers that we have, whether that be an OEM machine builder, system integrator, or end user. So specifically, I can call it a couple examples of folks using this in a automotive environment where automotive manufacturer using this, as well as that system integrator specifically have heard this becoming a useful tool for folks onboarding junior engineers where they're coming up to speed, perhaps don't have a very well structured training environment. This can kind of be a self-serve trainer, and I kind of like to refer to it as a digital engineer that you can ask questions of and not need to take up the valuable time of that senior person who might also have the information.
Yeah, and additional to Nick's response here, this report that I mentioned, the State of Industrial DevOps Workforce Report, we dug super deep into workforce trends and understanding how our product and how this particular functionality can help. We see 10,000 people in the US reaching retirement age every day. And when you have that many people, especially in your operational technology space, aging out and retiring, you need a way to transfer knowledge. And having a single source for your industrial code, having everything backed up, also having features that support new people coming in and support that knowledge and collaboration and transfer can be so impactful. So I hope that you'll download the report and also tap into Copia. We have another question in. PLC instruction sets are different. So if you don't specify the brand, what does it default to?
Another good question. I should have specified this out front, so my apologies for that. So Copia Copilot today is specifically focused on generating code for the Rockwell Studio 5000 platform. That's the one we've started out with, but do plan to expand it to other vendors that Copia supports today, especially since a kind of a core tenet of Copia is being vendor agnostic and understanding that many customers are, have a variety of platforms deployed in their facilities.
Thanks, Nick. I don't see any other questions in yet, but we'll hang on for another minute or two. If you do have any questions out in our audience, we're here to answer them.
Hey there, this is Joe here. I have a question I think could be helpful for the audience real quick. I think we've been focusing obviously on code translation. This is the key of this presentation, but curious if you could maybe real briefly go over some other key areas of Copilot. So someone maybe, if they're interested, can dive on our website and learn more about those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So we showed kind of what we're calling, we refer to as like net new code generation. So code generation from scratch. Other capabilities of Copilot that we didn't show here today are code modification. So where you have your existing code already version controlled within Copia, the interface allows you to very easily reference existing code. So for example, I could have selected an existing sequencer routine that I already have and ask it to modify that and change the logic for steps. And then the other ones, the other categories that we've seen a lot of value from our users on are code kind of interpretation and Q&A. So asking questions of Copilot about your code, such as, this is not working at this step. What do you think is going on? Can you suggest some improvements? And then another one is code documentation, which is something that seems to be pretty consistently a task that falls to the wayside oftentimes for people. And asking Copilot to just quickly generate user documentation, for your AOI, for instance, that you want to have be used by engineers, throughout the country if you have multiple facilities, for example.
Yeah, and coming up, I think March 21st, we're going to be digging into some more of those capabilities and functionalities. We did get another question in. Can you select a new underlying LLM? What is the default?
So today you can't select the underlying LLM, and we're not able to say at this time what the default is. But I can tell you that it is a flagship LLM model that was, like the ones that are out there. You're probably familiar with the ChatGPT, those types of things. We're using one of those foundational models in a enterprise setup, meaning that responses are not used to train the LLM or feedback. It is a locally kind of isolated, meaning that there's no chance that whatever you put into the Copilot would have the ability to potentially show up in a future prompt.
Thanks, Nick. And the question isn't there, but could you talk about how we improve the LLM over time because it is a closed environment, respecting the privacy of all of our customers?
Yeah, so from the outset with Copilot, privacy, understanding the industry that we're serving, privacy is top of mind in IP protection. So we've made it a focus to set out to not have the responses automatically feedback into the training model. So there's no chance of that leakage. So a lot of the ways today that we're improving the model are based on the in-app feedback, where you can say, yes, this was good, or no, this was not, and here's why, as well as just continued conversations with our users on areas for improvement. So it is more of a manual process where we're kind of updating things behind the scenes, but that is intentional given the focus on privacy.
Yeah, manual, but very focused on our customers and their protection, and understanding that we're going to keep looking at evolving that over time, and already getting great feedback in all the users that we've had to date. Cool. Any other questions from our audience? If not, we'll end up wrapping up here. All right. Well, thank you, Nick, so much for the presentation. Thanks to our full audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you do have any follow-up questions, we are always here for you. You can reach out at contact@copia.io, or if you are already a customer, reach out to your representative. And you can always connect with us on LinkedIn. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.